Then Startling Stories, Thrilling Wonder Stories. These were other magazines that he was in a great deal of the time. Thrilling Wonder, this cover is interesting. It has 2 of his stories on the cover, but he actually had 3 in Thrilling Wonders. And there are other times when he had at least 2 or 3 stories in Thrilling Wonder at the same time. So they use different names. Now this one says The Boomerang Circuit, a Kim Rendell novel by Murray Leinster. Then he had The Nameless Something, that was Bud Gregory's novelette by William Fitzgerald, which he sometimes used. And then there was another one in here, which was under Will F. Jenkins. So he had 3 stories, and Thrilling Wonder often did that. Now Astounding, he was in for years and years and years. He was writing for Astounding before John Campbell came there. When John came, he wanted stories from Dad, but Dad had gotten into the slick magazines at that time. He was writing a lot for Collier's, Country Gentleman, and then later the Saturday Evening Post, and of course they paid much, much more. But eventually he got back to it. During World War II, he went to New York because he wanted to do something for the war effort. He was with the Office of War Information. Am I running over my time? Office of War Information, and so he was in New York, and they would lunch together often. And Ben Bova has a wonderful story, which is in the book, that he told me when he took over. And he heard, at that time, Dad was mostly back in Virginia, but Ben heard he was in New York, and so they arranged to have lunch. And then at the end of the luncheon, Dad says, "Well, we've had a nice lunch, but we haven't come up with any good stories." And Ben said, "I could have slit my wrist." He said, "I realized that he and John would sit and they, develop a story." So that's in the book. But so he was. This is the issue that had Sidewise in Time in it. That's the cover of the issue with Sidewise in Time in it. And I don't really collect a huge number, but I have a few, and I just bought today one that has the cover of the First Contact issue. But he was in Astounding for many, many years, until not too long before he died. And as I say, he and John were great friends. These I brought, they might interest some of you who have been around a while. I think it was, again, David Hartwell, maybe not, who told me that he had met Dad at the first science fiction convention that he went to. And this is the cover of the program book for that. It was in Washington, D.C. in 1963. There's another couple more. These are from Disclave. In both of these he was guest of honor, which was also in Washington, Disclave, in 1970. And this particular cover is from, again, some people might remember or know of these. This was Fan Science, which was a fan magazine. This was from 1949. So basically, I've kind of given you an introduction, but I hope that you'd bring up questions and we could have a discussion. Because I see people going to sleep.
Can we see the book?
Yeah, well, yeah. But as I say, I haven't seen this. Okay, this has not. There are 40 pictures in the book, so this has no pictures. Okay. This is probably, this is what they sent him for the review. So there are no photographs, and as I say, there are 40 pictures in the book.
Who's publishing the book?
McFarlane. You know McFarlane.
Everybody look, because I'm going to keep standing here until y'all look.
Yes, well, here I can, if anybody...
Michael got this in the mail, and he was just dancing around the living room. He was so happy.
If you all want to take one of the, I can pass these around, but meanwhile, do you want to ask any questions, or I can run on. I don't really want to.
I remember your father's guest of honor speech at that 63 World Convention.
At which one?
In 1963.
You were, oh
That
good,
was
you
my
were
first
there?
World
Yeah.
Convention. As a genealogist, you'd be in a position to say, I think, is there anything in your father's ancestry that might lead one to predict that he'd become a major scientist?
Well, actually, it's interesting. My father made a lot over the fact that he never graduated from high school, and he was really deeply wounded by his family history. His family broke up when he was 13 years old, and that a psychologist will tell you that that is really the most damaging time for a boy's family to break up. And I don't know what happened. We never really knew what happened. We do know that he was working for the Norfolk and Southern Railroad, and they went into receivership, and so and he lost his job, and that was. But anyhow, for whatever. So he always made a lot of that. However, his grandfather was a lawyer, and all the family he used to say I came from a bunch of lawyers. So they were educated people, and his uncle was a doctor, two of them, they were doctors and lawyers. When his father came along, his father was the oldest in the family, and that was right in the middle of the war when he was growing up. So his mother's family were actually quite wealthy merchants, and he learned bookkeeping in the family. He became an accountant. But all of the younger ones, a couple of them were lawyers and whatnot in his father's family. So they were educated people. I think one of the things that I was most proud of in doing genealogy was in tracing the ancestry, which I have documented back to the first who came here around 1656, and he was the one that Dad always bragged about as the governor of old Albemarle County. But anyhow, it wasn't a will, it was the documentation of whatever you do when you die, and they figure out what you have. In it was listed a parcel of books, and this was in the 1700s. Now, you know how many people read and write in could read and write in the 1700s in this country? Very, very few. So, I mean, to me, that was they were readers, they were book people. The other thing that's kind of interesting is that his the same grandfather was a lawyer. And his wife was that grandmother. Her brother was a very prominent doctor, but I think he got tired of cutting off limbs in the war. He was very involved in the war. He was at Chancellorsville. Might not mean anything to Northerners, but he started hospitals and so forth. But after the war, he had a newspaper in Petersburg, Virginia, an agricultural newspaper. He was very involved in teaching mechanization. So here was somebody who was writing. So I think that was it. They were people. He was a University of Virginia graduate. The grandfather was a William and Mary graduate. So I think that was it. He was always around books, and you all know that that's the important thing. You be around books. So once in a while you get an itch to write one if you're around them enough. So that's probably the only thing. And his brother wrote, it's interesting. In fact, the story that he told, which is there, says that he said after I was writing, his brother was 7 years older, and he says George saw me selling stories, so he decided to. But they did.
So with all this